So we will talk about the human trafficking and human rights in migration. So here are the learning outcomes of our report. So at the end of the video, the students should be able to identify human rights in migration, different types of migration, the positive and negative impacts of migration, the human trafficking, reasons why human trafficking occur, most victims of human trafficking, the impacts of human trafficking to a country or state, country with the most human trafficking cases, the elements of human trafficking, the, the current state of human trafficking in the Philippines, and the Philippine government's battle against human trafficking. So let's start.
Human trafficking and human rights in migration. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of a person by means of the threat of use of force or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, the abuse of power, or opposition of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person, the purpose of exploitation. The unlawful act of transporting or coercing people in order to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of forced labor. What are examples of human trafficking? Examples of human trafficking are trafficking for forced labor, trafficking for forced criminal activities, trafficking in women for sexual exploitation, trafficking for the removal of organs. What are the three elements of human trafficking? The three elements of human trafficking are act, means, and purpose. To commit at least one act against another person, such as recruiting, or by using at least one means such as violence for the purpose of exploiting that other person for financial gain or material benefit. What is the current state of human trafficking in the Philippines? Human trafficking is the second largest criminal enterprise in the world after narcotics. In Asia's Western Pacific, human trafficking in the Philippines is a considerable concern. It has one of the largest victim populations in the world with an estimated of 784,000 people living as modern-day slaves. Human trafficking and the prostitution of children has been a significant issue in the Philippines, often controlled by organized crime syndicates. Human trafficking is a crime against humanity. So, explain human rights in migration. Human rights in migration is when migrants have been given special protections under international law to address situations where their rights are most at risk, such as in the workplace, in detention, or in transit. The protections afforded to a migrant, such as access to social security, will also depend on which treaties a state has ratified. Once an immigrant enters a new host country, the guarantee of respect for their human rights. Human rights violations against migrants can include a denial of civil and political rights such as arbitrary detention, torture, or lack of due process, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights such as the rights to health, housing, or education. Under international law, migrants have human rights by virtue of their humanity. International customary law and international human rights instruments are of universal application and therefore set states' duties and rights of migrants. State the different types of migration. Internal migration, moving within a state, country, or continent. External migration is moving to a different state, country, or continent. Emigration, leaving one country to move to another. And immigration is moving into a country, moving into a new place. And return migration is moving back to where you came from. That's all. Thank you.
Migration is a way to move from one place to another in order to live and work. Movement of people from their home to another city, state, or country for a job, shelter, and some other reasons is called migration. Nowadays, many people decide to migrate to have a better life. Employment opportunities are the most common reason due to which people migrate. Except this, lack of opportunities, better education, construction of dams, globalization, natural disasters such as flood and drought, and sometimes crop failure forced villagers to migrate to cities. Migration has a positive impact on the countries of origin. It lowers the unemployment rate, which reduces job rivalry. It creates less demand on natural resources and services such as food, water, education, and healthcare. In addition, the countries of origin benefit from the migrants who return home after they have acquired new skills and knowledge in the host country. The positive impact is the unemployment is reduced and people get better job opportunities. Migration helps in improving the quality of life of people. It helps to improve social life of people as they learn about new culture, customs, and languages, which helps to improve brotherhood among people. Migration of skilled workers leads to a greater economic growth of the region. Children get better opportunities for higher education. The population density is reduced and the birth rate decreases. And the negative impact are the loss of a person from rural areas, impact on the level of output and development of rural areas. Having large population puts too much pressure on natural resources, amenities, and services. The influx of workers in urban areas increases competition for a job, houses, school facilities, etc. It is difficult for a villager to survive in urban areas because in urban areas there is no natural environment and pure air. They have to pay for each and everything. Many migrants are completely illiterate and uneducated. Therefore, they are not only unfit for most jobs, but also lack basic knowledge and life skills. Poverty makes them unable to live a normal and healthy life. Children growing up in poverty have no access to proper nutrition, education, and health. Migration increased the slum areas in cities, which increased many problems such as unhygienic condition, crime, pollution, etc. Sometimes migrants are exploited. Pressure on public services such as schools, housing, and health care.
Human trafficking is a global crime that trades in people and exploits them for profit. People of all genders, age, and backgrounds can become victims of this crime, which occurs in every region of the world. Traffickers use violence, fraudulent employment agencies, and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick, coerce, and deceive their victims. The organized network or individuals behind this lucrative crime take advantage of people who are vulnerable, desperate of simple seeking a better life. Human trafficking has many forms. This includes exploitation and sex, entertainment and hospitality, industries, and as domestic worker or a forced marriage. Victims are forced to work in factories or construction sites or in an agricultural sector without pay or with an inadequate salary, living in fear of violence and often inhumane conditions. Some victims are tricked or concede into having their organs removed. Children are forced to serve as soldiers or to commit crimes for the benefits of criminals. So, why many people do this illegal activity? Are they forced to do this? Or it's just that they have been scammed by the agency? So, it's because of mass displacement, conflict, extremely poverty, lack of access to education and job opportunities, violence and harmful social norms like child marriage are all factors that push individuals into situation of trafficking. Ultimately, traffickers exist because human trafficking remains highly lucrative. There are two primary factors that drive human traffickers. First, high profits and low risk. This powerful combination is driving the explosive spread of human trafficking, making it one of the most profitable criminal industries in the world. And first, human trafficking is fluid by high reward, low risk dynamic. This means that traffickers can expect to make a lot of money with minimal fear or punishment or legal consequence. It just second most profitable illegal industry, second only to the drug trade. And while drugs are sold in one transaction, human being can be sold over and over again.
Who are the most victims of this violation and why? Probably women and children are the most victims of this issue. Women and girls are usually trafficked for the purpose of sexual and economic explosions, particularly prostitution and pornography, forced labor, exploitation, particularly prostitution and pornography, forced labor, including for work in commercial, agriculture, and domestic work. Arranged marriages or to be sold at brides, recruitment for participation in hostilities and such related purposes as sexual services, portage and domestic functions in conflict situations. Women's and girls' experience of trafficking indifferent to that of men and boys. Women and girls tend to suffer this proportionately heavy impact, whereas trafficked men find it difficult to access existing programs for victim assistance. This requires the inclusion of gender equality principles in the formulation and implementation of legislation and programs aiming at the prevention of trafficking in human beings. Positive and negative impacts of human trafficking to a country or a state. Human smuggling and trafficking have become a worldwide industry, incorporating millions of people annually and generating an annually turnover of billions of dollars. And the impacts of trafficking are felt both in the countries from which people are trafficked and the countries to which they are trafficked. In both sets of countries there are implications for society, including the impacts of family and communities left behind and gender relations in receiving countries in which women are often sold into sexually slavery. Economy, particularly in contexts where people seeking immigration opportunities for employment end up being trafficked, resulting in significant remittance losses. Health, women and children trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation are risked and spreading the disease among wider society. People are trafficked in dangerous conditions and often held even after they reach long-term detrimental effects on their mental and physical well-being. Rule of law. In both sets of countries, the operations of organized criminal groups whose illicit activities often extend beyond trafficking can have serious implications for national security. Sources: United Nations Special Reporter on Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, in 2013. A report, Integration of Human Rights-Based Approach and Measures to Discourage the Demand that Fosters of All Forms of Exploitation of Persons, especially women and children, and which leads to human trafficking.
Pakistan. The government of Pakistan does not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking, but it's making significant efforts to do so. The government demonstrated overall increasing efforts compared with the previous reporting period, considering the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. If anyone on its anti-trafficking capacity, therefore Pakistan was upgraded to Tier 2. These efforts included increasing investigations, prosecutions, and convictions, including increasing investigations and prosecutions under 2018 Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act or PTPA. Pakistan reported as the third with the most human trafficking cases with 2.1 million victims. This included 190 for sex trafficking, 536 for forced labor, and 20,572 for unspecified exploitation. 16,950 women, 2,918 men, 1,310 boys, and 50 girls. The government did not report the number of bonded labor victims identified compared with 30 identified in the previous reporting period. So, countries with the most slaves, the 2016 Global Slavery Index estimates 45.8 million people live in modern slavery. More than half of those live in the top 5 countries. So, here are the 10 most countries with slave. Number 1, India, population 1.40%. Number of people living in slavery 18,354,700. China, 0.25%, 3,388,400. Pakistan, 1.13%, 2,134,900. Bangladesh, 0.95%, 1,531,300. Uzbekistan, 3.97%, 1,236,600. North Korea, 4.37%, 1,100,000. Russia, 0.73%, 1,048,500. Nigeria, 0.48%, 875,500. DR Congo, 1.13%, 873,100. Indonesia, 0.29%, 736,100. So, ages 6 to to 8 is 163, 9 to 11, 196, 12 to 14, 278, and 15 to 17 is 257.
The three elements of human trafficking. In sense, for human trafficking to occur, a trafficker will commit at least one act against another person, such as recruiting, by using at least one means, such as violence, for the purpose of exploiting that other person for financial gain or material benefit. Act plus means plus purpose equals to human trafficking. Element 1. The act or acts of human trafficking, or what is done, the trafficker must commit one or more of the following acts: recruit, transport, transfer, harbor, receive, give and receive benefit, and control. A person becomes a human trafficker if he or she does any of the following acts for the purpose of exploitation: recruits another person for the purpose of exploitation, transports or transfers another person. Transporting involves moving a person to another place in order to exploit them. A trafficked person may travel normally and legally with a passport if they're crossing aboard by bus, car, air, train, or other transportation. In other cases, to prevent exposure, the trafficker may force them to travel illegally and or in dangerous or uncomfortable ways, such as in the trunk of a car. Transferring occurs when the trafficked person is transferred from one person to another. Harbors or receives another person for the purpose of exploitation. Harboring or receiving occurs when a human trafficker hides or houses a trafficked person and keeps them under control in order to exploit them. The responsibilities persons will receive benefits as payment.
Element 2. The means of human trafficking, or how it is done. Means: using one or more of the following: violence, threat of violence, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power or position of vulnerability. Violence or threats of violence against the person or her friends and family. A trafficker will often use violence or the threat of violence as a control tactic. The trafficked person may be made to fear that their loved ones will be sexually assaulted, beaten, or killed, or may be forced to witness the beatings or sexual assaults of others to make sure they comply with the trafficker's demands. So next is coercion. A trafficker may coerce another person through fear, such as the fear of being returned to a war-torn home, being separated from loved ones, or losing immigration status. Abduction. So abduction is the act of leading someone away by force or lies. Fraud. Fraud is a knowing misrepresentation of the truth that induces another person to act to his or her detriment. In the context of human trafficking, fraud may involve a transaction where a trafficker dupes a person into paying for forged or false travel documents or work visa, or for a false employment contract, in the belief these documents are legitimate in the destination country. The trafficker may also charge an illegal fee for a job that doesn't exist. The trafficked person may have borrowed money from her trafficker to pay for the fraudulent documents or employment contract. The trafficked person is then in a situation of debt bondage to her trafficker, who may also require her to pay the money back at a high interest rate or with additional fees and penalties. as time goes on. So deception. A trafficker may deceive a person into being trafficked by telling her that a well-paid job and a good working conditions are for a young person. A modeling contract or a singing career await her in another place, when in fact she may be exploited for sex or labor. Youth and children especially are more easily deceived because they are less aware of the risk of trafficking. Parents too, though, can be deceived into letting their children go with the traffickers if they believe their children are being offered a better life. Abuse of power. A trafficker who is in a position or of control or authority over another, such as a spouse, a parent, or a teacher, may abuse his or her power to exploit that other person.
Elementary, the purpose of exploration or why it is done. Purpose exploration in one or more of the following forms: sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery, servitude, organ removal, forced labor services. The purposes for which traffickers use the people they traffic may vary, but the ultimate goal of all traffickers is the same. They exploit other human beings for profit, which can be financial gain or material benefit. So traffickers exploit others for a variety of purposes. So sexual exploitation. A person trafficked for sexual exploitation is forced to provide sexual acts against their will for the financial benefits or material gain of the trafficker. Forced labor. So forced labor, all of or service which exact from any person under the menace of the penalty and for which said person has not offered himself voluntarily, or ILO convention on forced labor. In the context of human trafficking, a person trafficked for forced labor is made to work for little or no pay, or may be paid a full wage but then forced to return most in it cash to the trafficker. So domestic servitude. So domestic servitude is a form of forced labor and is defined as slavery or bondage. A person trafficked as a domestic servant may be forced to clean house, do the laundry, cook meals, maintain the lawns and garden, and look after the children, elderly relatives, and pets. So most trafficked domestic servants are required to be available all the times and work every day for a little or no pay, and they are often verbally, physically, and sexually abused by members of the household. The trafficked person may have no control over their travel or identify documents such as their passport, which may be confiscated by the employer trafficker, and forced or coarse organ removal. Kidney, liver, and heart in particular are in high demand around the world for people who need a replacement organ but can find a legitimate organ donor. So the organ removal is often conducted by clandestine clinics with a little or no attention given to the trafficked person post-operative care. So the organ is then sold on the international black market for large amounts of money. If the trafficked person survives the surgery, they may receive any tiny portion of that money. So element 1 is an act. So what is done? Trafficked person shall be recognized as victims of the act or acts of trafficking as such as shall not penalized for crimes directly related to the acts of trafficking enumerated in this act or in obedience to their other made by the trafficker or in relation thereto. So element 2, the means how it is done. So human trafficking occurs when a perpetrator, often referred to as trafficker, takes an action and then employs the means of the fraud and coercion for the purpose of compelling the victim to provide commercial sex acts or labor services. So elementary is exploitative purposes, why it is done. So the purpose of the purposes for the which trafficker use the people they are trafficked may vary, but the ultimate goal of all trafficker is the same. They exploit other human beings for profit, which can be financial gain or material benefit.
So my topic is all about the state of human trafficking in Luzon and in Visayas. So first is, what is human trafficking? Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Every year, millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide, including right here in our country, which is the Philippines. So, the traffickers are often parents or close relatives who operate in private residences or small cyber cafes, and many child victims, girls and boys, are younger than 12 years. Identified hotspots for this form of sex trafficking is in Luzon and in Visayas, that includes Iligan, Lapu-Lapu, Pampanga City, Quezon City, Malabon, Pasig, Taguig, and Caloocan. Reports cited a nearly 265% increase in unconfirmed reports of online child sexual abuse during the pandemic. Economic impacts of the pandemic, combined with an increased amount of time children spend at home, resulted in an increasing number of families to force their children into online sexual exploitation. So one of the happenings that occurred in Luzon, which happened on September 11 of 2022. So there were 4 minors who were allegedly victims of trafficking that were rescued in Bulacan on Saturday afternoon of September 10 by Central Luzon cops. So according to the reports, the minor victims were allegedly involved in sex trade. Pasiwen said that different law enforcement units joined forces and rescued the minor victims during an entrapment operation inside the DM Travelers Inn premises in Baliwag. So at this time, mostly of human trafficking victims were minors, since they were forced by their parents. And also, one of the reports here in Visayas happened in Lapu-Lapu City, which 2 human traffickers were convicted. So this happened on March 21 of 2019. So the authorities rescued 11 minors during the 3 simultaneous operations, with victims aged 2 years old, 6, 7, and 12. The conviction handed down on March 11, 2022 came after the 2 accused struck a plea bargaining agreement to plead guilty to lower offense related to online sexual exploitation. So, with the 2 suspects pleading guilty for other offenses such as attempted trafficking, their victims can now be assured that justice has finally prevailed. So after pleading guilty to attempted trafficking, the 2 accused will face 15 years imprisonment and fine of 500,000 pesos. And the court also ordered each suspect to pay additional 500,000 pesos for moral damages and 100,000 pesos for exemplary damages. So the conviction happened less than a week after the 3rd anniversary of the Philippine Internet Crimes Against Children Center. Cooperation among local and international law enforcement such as PNP WCPC, the NBI Anti-Human Trafficking Division, and the Australian Federal Police and the United Kingdom National Crime Agency, in partnership with the non-government organization International Justice Mission, or the PNA. So in this case, I believe that human trafficking deserves, or suspects of human trafficking deserves, a whole life imprisonment. So this is not really this is not good to be like to to fine a imprisonment, since this involves a lot of people and also minors. So that's it for me.
Human trafficking in Mindanao. In Mindanao, known issues include various forms of labor and sex trafficking, underage soldiers, and trafficking of migrants. Human trafficking in Mindanao is a complex problem because individuals who are responsible for this problem are competing on each other, and this problem have impact directly on individuals, families, and communities, and have implications for the lives of real people, both in terms of the multiple forms of trafficking that occur in the Philippines' unique social setting. So let's go to Cagayan de Oro. So the city has evolved into the central hub of human trafficking. Cagayan de Oro connects the land routes of the traffickers in the north, which is Surigao and Butuan City, with those in the northwest, Dapitan and Zamboanga City. The harbor and the airport also connect Cebu City and Manila as trafficking destinations to Cagayan de Oro. So, while most of the cities that serves as hubs for the criminal network in northern Mindanao are set up for domestic human trafficking in Zamboanga due to its geographical proximity, and also serves as a trafficking gateway to Malaysia. So, according to a study by Ekpat and Teres de Home, Cagayan de Oro is not only a transit zone but also a recruiting and destination city for victims of the trafficking rings. The Philippines Police Force also views Cagayan as a hotbed of cyber prostitution using children. The ignorance of the population and poverty render it easy for traffickers to victimize credulous parents and children. The recruited girls are usually from very poor families, from rural regions, or from the poorer outskirts of cities, where the parents' wages are not enough to cover the basic needs. Often the families are entirely without income. So you see, no? So they were being forced to do this illegal act due to poverty. And the saddest part is that most of the victims are women and children, because women are generally less physically capable than men, and children, they're just innocent. They need assistance, they need guidance, they do not know what they are doing because they're just innocent, they're just children. So, example of human trafficking in Mindanao, according to a report in Philippine News Agency, operatives of the Naval Forces Western Mindanao together with partner agencies rescued 16 victims of human trafficking in the province of Tawi-Tawi. An official said that the victims were rescued aboard a passenger ferry that was docked at the port of Bungao. This is Tawi-Tawi's capital town. The 16 rescued victims were all women. So they come from different provinces of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. 12 of the 16 victims were promised by the recruiter for high-paying jobs in Lebanon, while the remaining 4 as a domestic helpers in Malaysia. So each victim paid 25,000 pesos as placement fee. The latest operation brought to 37 the total number of rescued human trafficking victims since January this year in Tawi-Tawi. So how did the Philippine government deal with this problem? So in an effort to deal with the problem, the Philippine government passed Republic Act 9208, the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act of 2003, a penal law against human trafficking, sex tourism, sex slavery, and child prostitution. This law criminalizes trafficking for the purpose of exploitation. Any person found guilty of committing this act shall be penalized by life imprisonment and a fine of not less than 2 million pesos but not more than 5 million pesos. The Filipino government is partnering with NGO to identify the areas where better structures and increased funding are most needed. Organizations such as Renew Foundation and Made in Hope are empowering survivors of human trafficking in the Philippines through livelihood and skill training programs. So livelihood programs to improve the state of life of the low income sectors by giving jobs, business chances, healthcare access, and other form of assistance. So because the main reason of this problem is poverty, so they have no choice but to become a victim of this act to sustain their daily needs. And they also launch platforms for educating Philippine government units and public to about trafficking and how to report cases. So for example, they conduct seminars about when, where, and how to identify if that thing is human trafficking. So implementing development initiatives that tackle the underlying causes of trafficking and provide support and aid to potential and actual victims in all accordance with international human rights norms.